Even the best of ideas, with the best of intentions, sometimes turn out to be, in reality, the very worst. Buses are no exception. Take, for example, the guy Wulfrunian. This bus, which was supposed to have solved a lot of problems facing British buses in the late 1950s, turned out to be one of the biggest bus blunders of all time. With only 137 units built, it ended up taking down a major vehicle manufacturer. This is the story of the guy Wulfrunian, the bad guy of British buses. Hi, this is Jeffrey, and in this video we're going to take a look at one of the most obscure but interesting British buses of all time, the guy Wulfrunian. Now, the Wulfrunian was designed to solve a lot of problems of British buses in the late 1950s. However, it ended up causing a lot more problems than it could ever solve. Now, is the Wulfrunian the Ford Edsel of British buses? Quite possibly. Now, I know the Edsel is a car and the Wulfrunian is a bus, but they were both vehicles and they turned out to be the wrong vehicle at the wrong time. And it's a really, really interesting story. So let's get started in learning about the guy Wulfrunian, possibly the Ford Edsel of British buses. Sometimes, even what seems to be the best of ideas on paper, with the best of intentions, turn out to be the very worst. Let's take Ronald Brooke, for example, the once very vocal fleet engineer for the once massive West Riding Bus Company. At the time, he was considered somewhat out of his mind with his far-reaching newfangled ideas. Brooke got rather carried away with a scheme to design and produce a modern double-decker bus that was tough and strong enough to cope with the challenging and rough operating terrain of Wakefield and the surrounding areas. West Riding had then undertaken an expansion plan, which by 1957 saw the company become the UK's biggest bus company that was independent. The domino effect of this was significant influence with some manufacturers, and when Brooke had finally completed his ideas of his technological dream bus, which, according to legend, is said to have been designed on a napkin at a restaurant, various chassis builders were contacted with a view to turning this vision from a dream on paper to a product in reality. Even in simpler times, manufacturers were always receptive to differing specifications in power units or bodywork. But engineering tended to be set in stone, and the chassis or suspension was the pure responsibility of the chassis builder, be it Bristol, Daimler, or Leyland, to use as examples. Brooke's design was to feature many mechanical component ideas which today are commonplace on a modern bus. Air suspension and disc brakes is the present norm on every UK PSV chassis, but way back in the 1950s, this was viewed with both horror and wonderment. The engine was to feature up front like all other double-deckers of the time, but so was the entrance platform for the passengers. There was reason in Brooke's apparent madness, as his fleet suffered with kingpin and leaf spring failures, mainly caused by the shocking roads in the remote areas the company served. No one could offer a solution, so he decided to create his own. All of the big chassis suppliers viewed Brooke's plans and blueprints and kindly declined to become involved with such a bold and untried design. On paper, the bus made perfect sense, as new ideas often do, but reinventing the wheel was too much of a risk to take for manufacturers who were still recovering from years of wartime austerity rules. But one company showed a keen interest and took little persuasion to become involved, and consequently bring the Brooke dream into a reality which rather sadly proved to become more of a nightmare. Guy Motors Limited were once a well-respected builder of buses, trucks, and trolley buses who produced their products in Wolverhampton right up to 1982. Their products were far from revolutionary or futuristic, but certainly known for being reliable and robust in construction. The Arab double-deck chassis was very successful, selling in big numbers to municipal operators, and had benefited by being selected by the Supply Ministry during World War II to supply 2,200 buses over a 3-year period, with the first batches entering service in 1942. Not quite as big as Daimler or Leyland at the time, Guy was seen as a respected rival, and this new chassis idea was seen as an ideal opportunity to mix it with the big boys and pave the road ahead for future bus designs. But Guy had its fair share of problems, just as Leyland was to suffer a little later. A South African business venture was dying, and not long before the new bus was launched, some not-so-good news hit the company. Founder Sidney Guy retired after more than 40 years, leaving a great company without a great leader and a sound businessman. Undeterred, Guy launched the all-new Wulfrunian onto a shocked and stunned marketplace in 1958, featuring almost all of Ronald Brooke's novel ideas. Not only was the suspension air provided, but also independent of the front axle, which also featured the Dunlop-developed disc brakes. A drop rear axle was fitted to provide a lower chassis so that low bridges could be passed under, and the all-new Gardner 6LX 10.5-liter diesel was mounted up front as per the design requirements. Guy Motors sent 2 development chassis to Leeds to be bodied by Charles Rowe in time for the 1958 Commercial Motor Show. Major new features of the Wulfrunian were: number 1, anti-roll air suspension; number 2, disc brakes with new safety operation; number 3, independent front suspension; number 4, automatic transmission; number 5, almost no lubrication points; number 6, brown cave engine cooling system; number 7, grouped and colored piping; number 8, helical geared double reduction rear axle; and number 9, recirculatory ball steering gear. Original purchasers of the Wulfrunians were, in alphabetical order: number 1, Accrington Corporation; number 2, Berry Corporation; number 3, County Motors; number 4, Lancashire United; number 5, West Riding, who purchased 126 out of the 137 units produced; number 6, West Wales Motors; number 7, Wolverhampton Corporation; and finally, there were also 2 demonstrators. The Lancashire Motors, West Wales, and County Motors buses were later sold to West Riding. The 2 demonstrators went to West Riding in 1966 for spares. Bodybuilders were Charles H. Rowe, East Lancashire, and Northern Counties. In most Wulfrunians built, the staircase was situated on the near side of the vehicle, immediately behind the entrance. To accommodate this, the 4-piece folding entrance doors were of different sizes. The near side rearward ascending staircase gave the driver full view of the stairwell. In the lower saloon, after the area taken up for the staircase, the first twin seat faced rearwards and gave a cozy, relaxed feel to the interior. Guy had certainly stolen the thunder from Leyland, who had developed its rear-engined Atlantean chassis, and some considerable interest was shown. Designed in anticipation of the relaxing of the one-man operation rule that made the front entrance area a requirement, the front axle was positioned further back than the norm to free up platform space. Owing to the huge size of the Gardner engine, the driver's cab area was very cramped in relation to other buses, so right away, these buses were unpopular with driving crews and engineering staff who found them awkward to work on. The chassis itself was tough and substantial, like Guy products that came before it, but the combined weight of the driveline and complicated independent front suspension subframe gave the bus a massive weight bias over the front axle. They could be tricky to drive in slippery or icy conditions, especially when traveling uphill, and all that unladen weight on the front end resulted in similar problems that Brooke had tried to avoid: accelerated wear on critical suspension, or steering components such as the kingpins and shock absorbers, and don't even mention the radiator-less cooling system either. Wulfrunians also suffered from abnormal front tire wear, again caused by weight balance deficiencies. This eventually caused operators to remove the front 2 rows of seats on the upper deck and reducing the capacity by 8 passengers in an attempt to preserve the life of the components that Ronald Brooke hated to often replace on older bus designs. In reality, he had compounded the problem rather than cure it. Huge warranty costs and canceled orders were key to Guy Motors entering bankruptcy in early 1961, and rumor has it that Guy lost almost 500,000 British pounds in their final year of trading before entering administration. The operators that bought the few Wulfrunians outside of West Riding quickly regretted it. In the end, rising costs, poor reliability, and shortage of spare parts forced even West Riding to admit defeat, and, largely due to financial problems caused by the Wulfrunian, it sold out to the Transport Holding Company in 1968, subsequently passing to the National Bus Company. A massive injection of second-hand MBC Bristol Lodeckas, some new Daimler fleet lines, and the retention of older Guy Arabs enabled a rapid rundown of the Wulfrunian fleet, and on the 26th of March 1972, the last West Riding Wulfrunian appeared, almost unnoticed, at the closure of the Bradford trolleybus system. The entire fleet was disposed of in just over 12 years from the arrival of the first example, and some buses were a mere 4 years old when they went for scrap. 7 vehicles were sold for further service, but with one exception, they were all gone by 1973. The exception, number 970, soldiered on with its 7th owner, Crouch and Luxury Coaches, in North London until 1978. What was it like to ride a Wulfrunian? This account is from viewer Cedarcam, who recalled an experience with a West Riding example. They removed 4 seats from the upstairs front because the drivers complained the steering was too heavy, with people sitting ahead of the front wheels. They rolled about as well, and my scariest ever bus ride was on one that almost overturned on a road junction with adverse camber. It went so far over that the body panels scraped the road on the driver's side and left a gouge in the road. It was caused by almost everyone being on that side of the bus. I got off the bus at the stop just after the junction and saw the damage. Guy went on to be purchased by Jaguar Daimler, who kept the Wulfrunian on the order books until 1965, of which during that time 126 were purchased by the West Riding Company out of a total production run of just 137. Guy ceased all bus building during British Leyland ownership in 1969, from then on concentrating on truck chassis. In a nutshell, the Wulfrunian was a brave and clever idea in theory, but in reality, a total and even suicidal disaster, proving beyond doubt that even the best ideas can turn out to be the very worst. Interestingly enough, and thankfully, 2 Wulfrunians still survive. West Riding 995, formerly County Motors 99, went directly into preservation in 1972 following its final appearance at Bradford. After many years of successful rallying, it is a very valued possession of the West Riding Omnibus Preservation Society based at Dewsbury Bus Museum. West Riding 970 was acquired by well-known bus enthusiast Basil Hancock in 1982, and eventually the bus was acquired by a group from the West Riding Omnibus Preservation Society and had it moved to the Dewsbury Bus Museum, where it returned to operation in 2022, fully restored in its original West Riding red and ivory livery. Other legacies of the Wulfrunian still live on. During the development of the Leyland Titan, the B-15, Wulfrunian drawings were used as the basis for both the front and rear suspension designs, and a series of tests were carried out for Leyland in 1970. Not long after that came the appearance of the Volvo Ailsa double-deck chassis, and with its front entrance, front engine layout reflected much of the Wulfrunian's design in a simpler chassis. It is rumored that Volvo made a very detailed inspection of one of the surviving Wulfrunians before starting on the design of the Ailsa. Okay, so there it is, a brief history of the infamous Guy Wulfrunian. Now, admittedly, I probably do not have every single detail of every single variation of the Guy Wulfrunian in this video. To put in every mechanical aspect of it and every specific design detail that made it different from every other bus would probably be impossible. So I basically tried to give an overview of the Guy Wulfrunian, its history, and the variations that did exist of this type of bus, of which only 137 were built. Now, another issue here is that the Wulfrunian may or may not have been the major factor in the bankruptcy of Guy Motors. I've read varying accounts. Some say yes, some say no, some say it's a myth. So I'm not sure about that. And one last thing. Does anybody out there know why Guy Motors used an American Indian chief as their logo? I don't have the answer to that, but I thought maybe someone out there does know. I think that's quite interesting that a British vehicle manufacturer was using an image of an American Indian chief. So I just thought that was kind of amusing. So anyway, I hope you really enjoyed this look at the Guy Wulfrunian, possibly the Edsel of British buses. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye.